Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is the podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I am happy to be with you on this Tuesday, another interview. I hope your weekend went well. It is really, really smoky here in this area. We are a couple hours south of the fire up by Paradise, which is an absolute tragedy. I'm sure you've heard about it on the news. And then there's fires in Southern California as well. It is a mess. I'm just so thankful for first responders and firefighters and everybody who has been working so diligently. And my heart hurts for everyone who has lost so much in these fires. But I just wanted to mention that because it is very close to home and it is, it's been on national news and everything. I just wanted to acknowledge it before getting started with the episode. So, anyway, hope your week is going well. And as I said, we have another interview today. I'm excited about this one because I am interviewing, as I mentioned on Thursday's episode, Owen Sullivan. He has 4 books out currently. The first 3 are a trilogy, so they go together as a series. And then his 4th book is a standalone novel. We talk about that first. And I am excited always to have authors on the podcast, but this was a special interview to do because Owen has been friends with my hubby for 20 years or more. So they've known each other a long time, definitely before I came into the picture. And so it was really great for him to be able to come and sit down with me and actually come to the studio, which doesn't happen very often. It was fun to actually look at an author while they were speaking instead of just listening on audio. But at any rate, as I mentioned, he does have the 4 books, and we start by talking about his newest book, which is called The Money is Green, and let me go ahead and give you the description of that book. After losing his wife to an affair, along with the electrical company he built, Jason Ballard is experiencing life at its cruelest. In a desperate attempt to get back on his feet, he takes a job with Soltech, a thriving solar company based in Shanghai, only to discover not all that glitters is gold. Mei Chen, the seductive wife of the 3rd highest ranking official in the Communist Party, owns and operates Soltech with a cruel hand. An industrious and successful businesswoman, she makes no attempt to hide her excessive wealth or shy away from her controversial opinions. Although already extremely powerful, she yearns for more: wealth, status, and above all, power. Leave it to the United States Congress to throw open the doors to it all. With literally billions of dollars slated for green energy products, Mei Chen stands boldly at the front of the line, ready to grab as much as she possibly can. And Jason, realizing too late that she is a ruthless adversary and will stop at nothing, risks his very life to oppose her. So there is a bit going on here, obviously. You've got Jason, who is the main character, who's kind of at a crossroads in his life. You've got Mei Chen, a woman who is seeking more of pretty much everything, especially power, and will go to pretty extreme measures to attain that power. She feels like there are certain things that she deserves and that she has earned, and she will stop at maybe nothing to get those things. It becomes, it starts out, you learn a little bit about solar energy, about green energy products, about the building world in general, and some of those dynamics. But at the heart, this really is, it turns it to be a thriller. There is a lot of action that happens. And I don't want to give too much away, of course. But at the same time, there's also some relationship stuff going on. So Jason has a pretty contentious relationship with his daughter. He has a new girlfriend. The new girlfriend and the daughter, who's 15, don't get along. So you've definitely got relationship dynamics in there. And then there's all of the intrigue and the drama that's going on around the character of Mei Chen and her ambitions. So that is the description of The Money is Green. I'm going to go ahead now and turn to the interview with Owen, and let's go ahead and get started. Hi, Owen. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here. I'm excited to talk about your books. I'm also excited because you're actually here in the studio. I very rarely have authors that are available to come to the studio, so thank you for doing that.
Well, I can travel. I travel well.
That's good. So we are here to talk about your books. Before we do that, though, I would love for my listeners to get to know you a little bit. So if you could share something about yourself, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Sure. I am a real estate developer here in Sacramento, California. Build homes and apartments in this area. Been doing that for approximately 35, 40 years, something like that. And so I have a thorough knowledge of real estate finance and that type of stuff. And so I'm married. I have 2 kids. I have 5 grandkids. Been in California, born and raised in California, and I'm still here. And all the stuff that I've written about, I guess most authors write about what they know, and real estate is, kind of my forte, so I have a, pretty good handle on that. So most of my stuff that I write about has a thread of that in going through the books. So that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah, I could definitely tell that as I was reading through. I could hear you and your your knowledge of building and that sort of thing, and the way you describe certain things. I was like, yeah, that's that's Owen.
That's me.
So we're going to start with your most recent book, which is The Money is Green. Can you tell us about the plot of that book?
Sure. And the way that book came about was it was a standalone book. The first 3 books were a series. This one came out after that. And in the recession of the Great Recession of 2008, I had to kind of do something that was different from building homes because it was so dormant. So I delved into the green energy business in primarily solar panels and that type of thing. And it was kind of eye-opening because I was working on larger commercial projects like solar farms, big rooftop solar projects like on large, 300,000 square foot buildings. And the dynamic of that industry was, I hadn't really paid much attention to it, but it was there was just a ton of money in it. In 2008, the Obama administration put out a stimulus bill to stimulate the economy. It was like $1 trillion bill for projects. Part of that stimulus was like $300 billion in green energy projects. So there was a ton of money available for projects, solar farms and all that stuff. And so I was kind of intrigued by that. And looking back on that, after I'd written the first 3 books, I was looking for something, another story. And so I kind of, anytime you have a ton of money in some particular industry that's available for people, there's going to be greed and corruption. And that's always a good story when, there's money and evil people involved. And so that was kind of the basis for that story, is how, the greed and the corruption in the green energy industry, the solar panel industry. And so taking that, also in that industry, China is a major player because their government subsidizes a lot of their companies. So China is one of the largest manufacturers of solar panels. So knowing that, I figured I'm going to have to, tie that in. And how did I do that? Well, one of the main characters, Mei Chen, is a Chinese woman, and she's married to the 3rd highest ranking official in the Chinese government. So she's a powerful lady, and she has a solar panel manufacturing company, and she wants to get some of those dollars that are available through the green energy thing, the stimulus bill. So that's kind of how my book goes, and I dive into that. I kind of pull the curtain back on that industry, because it's when you look out there, you hear about a solar farm. Like all of a sudden out in the Mojave Desert, there's a 100-acre solar farm, and you think, wow, that's cool, but nobody really thinks about how did that come about. So I kind of went into my book, peel back and put a face on, how that particular project came about. And I don't get into the the weeds with it, but it's just kind of peel back a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually there's all of the building and the contracts and all of those elements, but it's a thriller as well. I mean, there's there's a lot of action that happens in this book, and it's
well, again, anytime you have something that's got a lot of money and power and stuff, there's always going to be a lot of things going on behind the scenes that are not always upward or deviant in this case. And the thing about all of my books is that they have some historical reference. There's I'm creative, but I'm not that creative that I can just come up with these stories out of the blue. There's always something that happened along the way that I picked this out of. So in this particular case, there was a congressman who was here in California that was a big, gun advocate, or not a gun rights advocate, but an anti-gun guy. But he got caught in a scheme, running guns to through Mexico. Okay. It's a true story, and so it was part of that. All this stuff was part of I threaded through my book, and it just makes for I look back and I kind of laugh,
right?
But it makes for interesting stuff.
Truth is stranger than fiction sometimes.
It is. And the other thing is the main character, Mei Chen, this woman. She's a good looking, a beautiful Chinese woman in her probably in mid 40s. Like I said, she's married to a high ranking official. But I took her character from a book. I don't know if you had read it. I think it's called The Battle Cry of the Tiger Mom. It was by Amy Chow. And she's a Harvard professor, I believe, and she's a Chinese American woman. She wrote this book, and it was contrasting the styles of a Chinese mother versus an American mother, how they raise their kids. And it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it was true. The way and the difference being, Chinese women or parents are very strict. Mm-hmm. They are, their kids are focused. They have piano lessons. They have violin lessons. There's no such thing as sleepovers or soccer or any, the stuff that American kids do. So I took her, personality, the author, and that's who Mei Chen was. And she was a strict Chinese woman, very focused, wanted to have power, wanted wealth. Even though she had it, she wanted more. Mm-hmm. And, she was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, she's definitely a woman with a plan.
Yeah.
Or multiple plans, actually. Yeah.
Again, and in that vein, too, is one of the things that she has is she's the firstborn in her family, and she's a woman, mm-hmm. which is disappointing to her father and mother because she's not a boy. In right. Chinese, culture, that back, I guess in the 50s it would be, that was kind of a not a good thing. So she seems to be always wanting to live up to the fact that she's not a boy, mm-hmm. To please her father, but nothing seems to be enough.
Right. So now you've heard a bit about Mei Chen, one of the main characters of the book. We do have to take our first break of the podcast, but when we come back, we'll be turning our attention to Jason, the other main character of the book, and definitely a very different character from that of Mei Chen. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back. Hi, this is Sarah, host of the GSMC Book Review Podcast. As not only the host of a book review podcast, but also someone who loves to read, I get excited when I get to recommend books for you, and I have one of those today. The New York Times bestselling author of Hoot, Carl Hiaasen, is back with Squirm, a wildly entertaining, slightly twisted new adventure about snakes, grizzly bears, a spy drone, a missing dad, and knowing when and when not to let things go. Squirm is recommended for readers ages 8 through 12, so if you have someone in your life who might enjoy this book, or someone in your life who you already know loves Carl Hiaasen, maybe you love to read together as a family, Whether you're already fans or you're looking for something new to read, I can definitely recommend Squirm by Carl Hiaasen. Support for this message comes from Random House Children's Books, and Squirm is available now wherever books are sold. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. We're going to go ahead and jump right back into my interview with author Owen Sullivan. We're talking currently about his fourth book, The Money is Green. So Mei Chen is one of the main characters, and her opposing force, I guess you could call him, is Jason.
Correct.
And so talk about Jason a little bit as a main character. What do you think will resonate with readers about him?
Okay, he's an American man who's divorced, raising his teenage daughter by himself in Santa Clara. He lost his business again in the recession. He was an electrical contractor, and he's trying to find his way again. He's got self-doubts about whether he was a failure from in his marriage, in his business. Things that really weren't his fault. Through no fault of his own, but he still feels that he's something not quite worthy enough of doing what he's doing. But he gets on with Mei Chen. She hires him to run her company. He kind of quickly steps up and starts running her company. And he's a hardworking, honest, very likable individual. He has his challenges. He's trying his best with his daughter, who's a little bit rebellious. And, he's got an ex-wife who is, he still kind of holds a place in his heart for her, even though she's, just dropped him and run off with somebody to go live in North Dakota.
As you do.
Which most women do, of course, right? They just
Never
run off
crossed my mind.
run off with some pipe driller or some driller in North Dakota. They leave beautiful Santa Clara to go to Bismarck. But anyway, and so he's still struggling with that, and then he gets on with Mei Chen, and it's a pretty high flying lifestyle with her. Now he's not with her, but he's working for her. But she's got a place in Hong Kong, she's in Shanghai. They got offices back and forth, and he's here, there, and everywhere, and he's got to find a place for his daughter to keep when he's gone, and it's kind of he's kind of conflicted what to do here. And then he's also, as the story goes on and he gets more involved in Mei Chen's business, he kind of sees that she's not as ethical as he is. And, he starts to peel back a little bit of the onion of her business. And then that's when things kind of start to unravel.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned some of the things that you've written about from your own experience. What kinds of research did you have to do for the book?
Well, I've never been to Shanghai or Hong Kong. So I had to go, really get into what was going on in that city. Get myself familiar with the city. I had to go through. Mostly, did it online. I'd go look up, different travel sites, look at different hotels. What's the culture of it. I had to look up some of the solar farms that I refer to are actually in existence. One outside the Mojave Desert. So I had to, research how that came about. What was the name of the solar or the utility company that actually bought the power from that particular solar farm that was generated? The one outside of Nevada, eastern Nevada. There was another one in there. So I just went through different sources to familiarize myself with what went on, how it came about, and who were the players involved.
Mm-hmm. And this is off topic, but you're the only author I've met that can use the word photovoltaic in a sentence multiple times and that would be completely natural.
Well, it's actually the term is PV. They shorten it, but photovoltaic is that's a word. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, and yet it just flows through the conversation as it would.
Yeah, well, if you're in the solar business, photovoltaic is that's a very good term.
Exactly, it's just fun to say.
Yeah.
So this is your fourth book. You mentioned the first three story or a series. So can you talk about that series a little bit?
Sure. The first book, just a little backstory. I'd never thought about writing a book of my, if you told me 10 years ago that I'd be writing, 4 books, I'd say you're nuts. There's no way. But in 2008, when the recession came along, just due to the circumstances, I found myself with a lot of time. And I was trying to get, I had a couple of houses that I was trying to do a short sale with the bank, and it went back and forth with this bank, and it went on for months and months and months. And I'm thinking to myself, I go, I'm in this industry and I know this, and I'm having problems. What's it like for the average person out there who doesn't do this for a living? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's got to be a nightmare. And I just thought, there's a story here that, ought to be told. So that's how I just sat down and started writing The House is Money, which is a play on words. It's a gambling term. If you are playing, like say you're at a blackjack table and you put up $100 and you win $200, you win $200. Now you have $300 on the table. Well, you take the $100 that you put initially and you put in your pocket. Now you're playing with the house's money. Mm-hmm. That's where that term comes.
Right.
Well, in this case, I'm talking about the equity in the people's homes that they took and they bought, refinanced and bought cars and bought boats and stuff like that. They're playing with their house's money. So that's kind of, they're gambling with their future. But at any rate, so this book starts in like 2006, and it's prior to the market falling apart. And again, I was trying to figure out who would be the voice when I was writing this, who would be the best voice to talk about this story of going through the housing market and the rise and fall of it. You could use like a real estate broker, a homeowner, a mortgage broker, a developer like myself. All of those would be good, but I thought it needs to be someone who's inside. So that's where I came up with the character who was hired. He was a young man who got hired by a hedge fund to sell mortgage-backed securities. Mm-hmm. And he, it was a Wall Street firm, but he was based out of San Francisco. He starts, and the market's it's going crazy. He's making money. Everybody in the industry's making money. His parents are buying a new home over in Sacramento. They're making money on their home. The antagonist is a developer, a rich developer, and he's
he's a jerk.
He's an idiot. He is. He's Donald Trump before Donald Trump.
I was just thinking of him pouring his coffee on the crabs. It was just not nice.
I had to laugh about that scene. That was pretty funny. But he's just kind of a clueless, guy. He inherited his company from his father. He's kind of a screwball and growing up, and he never really actually grew up. But he everybody's in this period of time is making a ton of money in the industry because the market is so hot. A couple years into it, my character starts to see, his company starts to see cracks in the industry, and they start pulling back on buying the securities because they see the thing, see the market changing. Well, he can't tell anybody about what's going on. Because even though he kind of sees it, his parents are already halfway through their house being built. His girlfriend is involved in stuff, and she's a real estate appraiser, but she's got other things that she's involved in also. So then the market starts to tumble. Well, the developer guy never sees it. He just thinks that it's just going on and on and on, and his paramour is a mortgage broker. She doesn't see it, and so it all comes crashing down on everybody
right
before anybody could do anything about
right.
it.
And as the reader, you're like, you have the benefit of hindsight as the reader, because you're like, people, what happens, but
right. It's funny that people who I've sold it to and read it come back and say, "Oh my God, it's like deja vu all over again." Anybody who is in the industry, the real estate industry, like if you're a realtor or a broker or a mortgage person or a construction person, really knew it, felt it, went through it, and so it was they really kind of understood what happened. The other thing I do in this book is I don't get into the weeds again, like I was saying the other one, but I tell readers a little bit more than you would normally know about what went on behind the scene, what caused the market to crash, what were some of the factors that that triggered it. Mm-hmm. Again, not being, I don't want to be boring in it and just bore the reader to tears, because I would be bored if I started reading about credit derivatives and all this BS. So I just give them enough that they didn't probably know before, mm-hmm. but it kind of, it shows them, gives them a little clear picture why it, fell apart.
Right. I mean, it's, in a way, it's historical fiction because you are telling the story of the way the crash happened, but without, writing an economics book.
and trying to point it out through the eyes of somebody who's there, who's on the inside versus somebody on the outside.
Right.
So that's kind of, what I wanted to do with that. And again, I just thought that there was a story there that could be told, but, because of my knowledge and, my being where I was, because I had a front row seat to this, this crash, I've seen all phases of it. So I just thought it was a good way to put it out there.
Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and take our second break of the podcast, and when we come back, we'll have the conclusion of the interview with Owen and be talking more about books and writing and all of that wonderful, fun author stuff. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Owen Sullivan. I read for you the description of his fourth book, The Money is Green. I do want to go ahead now and read for you the description of the first book, The House is Money. This is the description of the first book, but gives you an insight into that trilogy as a whole. So here is the description of The House is Money. Passionate, idealistic young Matt Whiteside has just landed the job of his dreams. Dressed to kill and running on pure ambition, he enters the ranks of mortgage-backed securities traders twice his age for one of the most prestigious firms in San Francisco. Life couldn't be sweeter. But the roller coaster has only just begun. Upon meeting Stephanie, an equally enterprising young real estate appraiser, his dreams appear to be unstoppable. But unbridled love too often hides the truth in its shadow, and not everything is as it appears. As he discovers the wild world of real estate investment, experiencing a soaring financial wave never seen before, Matt is welcomed with open arms into a seductive arena almost too good to be true. When insatiable greed raises its ugly head, jealousy and betrayal fall quickly behind. In a moment of brutal clarity, his world shatters with the realization he is merely a pawn in someone else's wicked game. Just as quickly as it all began, the housing bubble begins to burst, and his dreams slip through his fingers as he desperately struggles to hold on to a world that never really existed. So again, you have, that real estate world, you've got some financial issues, and you've also got intrigue and a little suspense. So that is the description, again, of The House is Money, the first of the three books, the first of his first three books. Let's go ahead and get back to that interview with Owen. The first book, The House is Money, and your most recent book, The Money is Green, are, let me look at the label, the Indie Book Awards finalists. So congratulations, first off. And then how does that process work? Do you get nominated?
No, there are all sorts of book award deals that are out there. Like, they have the New York Book Festival Awards, the San Francisco Book Festival Awards, the Midwest Book Award. Anyway, there's a lot of what you do is you make an application. There's a fee like $60 or something like that, and you send your book in, and they'll judge it. In this one, the Indie Book Awards is the largest. It's called the Independent Publishers and Authors Book Awards, and it's the largest awards in the United States for independent authors and what do you call publishers. So this was a pretty big thing. And when I sent my first book in, I was just shocked that it was a file. I mean, I had never written anything before.
Right, that's awesome.
And I came in, and then it was also a finalist in the New York Book Festival and the San Francisco Book Festival. So it's kind of cool. The second book I wrote came in first place a year later. I think it was a year later. The Money is Green.
Liquid Gold.
Liquid Gold. Excuse me. that one came in first place, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So my wife and I flew back to New York, and they had an award ceremony at the Harvard Club.
Nice. That's really cool. You are an independent author. Where then can people find your books?
They can go to Amazon, and you could just query, my name, Owen Sullivan, and the books will come popping up.
Okay.
Or you could go to you could put the name of the book, the House is Money, the Liquid Gold, Deed of Trust, or The Money is Green. Any one of those will come back up. Or you could go to thehousesmoney.com. That website will pick it up, and it'll come directly to me. And if you want to go that route, I can sign the book and send it to you that way.
Okay, thank you.
And it's also digital, so you can.
Okay.
The ebook is on through Amazon. You can get it that way.
Nice, thank you. What's next? Do you have another book coming out?
I do. Okay. It's called Lies Beneath the Surface, and I'm
guessing it's another play on words.
Yes. Yes. This book will be out probably by the end of the year. We're just finishing the cover and formatting the actual book itself to be able to get it published. And I'm hoping to have it out by the end of the year. Again, I don't have the elevator pitch on that one down yet, but it's kind of, again, it's a historical. There's a lot of historical reference to it that it's not going to be obvious, but that's where I got the story from. The story is it's about a young guy who is a promising investigative reporter who has a kind of a rising star at the would be at the LA Times, but I call it the LA Herald. Mm-hmm. And he trips over a story about just kind of an explosive story that he takes to his editors, and he hasn't completely sourced it, but they get all excited, and they run with it prematurely. But it's so explosive that there's talk of a Pulitzer Prize. People's heads are rolling because of the scandal that is involved, and it goes on for about 3 or 4 weeks until it starts to unravel. When the source it finds out that the source was lying and it wasn't true, and then he got kind of thrown under the bus. He ends up in the backwater of Reno, the Reno Tribune, which would probably be the Reno Gazette, and doing sports reporting. So he's gone from being a rock star to, now he's kind of a pariah, but he still hasn't gotten the investigative reporting out of his system. So there's an accident on a ranch, kind of a mysterious death on a ranch of a rancher that he catches his eye in his paper, and it just it was weird the way it happened. And so he starts, digging around about it, and the more he digs, the more he finds that there's way more to this death than just a coincidence. And it has to do with, the people in the Interior Department, Secretary of State, the Bureau of Land Management, and just a lot of people in government and a lot of money, again, all this big money based on this little rancher, dying. So
Okay. Oh, it sounds interesting.
like I said, it's not I haven't got the elevator pitch down. But.
That's okay. We don't need an elevator pitch here.
Yeah.
And so you talked a little bit about the fact that you never thought you would start writing, or that you wouldn't be, you never thought about writing until you thought about it. Do you have advice for aspiring authors?
Yeah, my advice is this. I don't know how many times people have come up to me, at the place where I'm selling books, like at the fair or whatever venue it is, and say, "Oh my gosh, I've got a book in my head, and I've got a great story." And I said, "Well, have you? My first question is, have you written anything?" And they go, "No." I said, "Well, you need to write it. You need to put it down on paper. Just start writing, and don't stop, and don't stop until you finish. Just keep writing. I don't care if don't concern yourself with, is it perfect? Is everything right? Does it flow? Whatever, write everything. Just write it until you can conclude it. You can always go back, clean it up, have somebody else look at it, clean it up, but don't start a chapter and then say, "Oh gosh, where do I go from here?" Just write. Keep writing.
Yep. Thank you. You're busy. You're a busy guy. You've got a lot of stuff going on. So how do you fit in your writing schedule?
Because that is funny. Somebody asked me, "Is this what you do for a living?" I said, "No. I build homes for a living. This is just kind of a sidelight." What I do is I kind of discipline myself that once I start something. Well, first off, I need the idea. I kind of troll around the idea in my head, what the story is going to be, who might be the characters, where it would take place. What's the venue and how is it going to go? And then I'll just sit down and write. And usually I try to write a little bit in the morning and then write a little bit in the evening or afternoon. And I try to pace myself to put 1,500 words a day down, and with a goal of 10,000 words a week. So, and I just every day, usually at the same time, sit down for an hour or so, try to get as much as I can down, same thing in the evening or whatever it is. And then just even overall, if it bleeds over to the weekend, again, take an hour or two to try to get that goal of 10,000 words. And if I can do that, which I can't, but that's the goal.
Right.
But if I can, it only takes me about 10 to 12 weeks to get a full novel done. But that's just now you've just got it on paper. Now you got to go back and clean it up. Make sure, because when you're writing something in the first week versus what you write, you'll forget about what you wrote in the first week on the 10th week. Mm-hmm. So you're going to make mistakes. So you got to go back and correct them.
Right.
Make it coherent.
Do you keep any kind, I know some authors have Excel spreadsheets, or they have outlines, or they have different systems for keeping track. Do you do anything like that?
I just have just a legal pad. Mm-hmm. And when I come up with a character, I'll write the name, what they do, who they're associated with, kind of just a little bit about them to go back. Because even doing that, you don't know how many times that I've gone back and find that, I've named this guy Bill, but by the 4th chapter, he switched to John,
Right. It's got to be confusing.
Yeah, it is.
Do you like to read?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Who are your favorite authors or genres?
I read a lot of. I read a lot of everything. If it's fiction, John Grisham has always been, one of my favorites. He's just always all his stuff is good stuff. I've actually gone back and read a couple of him. The Firm, like for instance, I went back and reread that again because I just like the style of it. As far as another one who's kind of historical fiction is James Michener. Mm-hmm. I don't even compare myself to any of those guys, but he weaves an entertaining story into something that is historical, and it's just really, I always found him very fascinating. Mm-hmm. People like that. James Patterson is another one. He's good. I like him. I also like just reading, I don't want to say it's documentaries, but just, biographies or, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
One of the things I'm actually reading now, which I referred to in the Money is Green, is a story about the Long March, which was the back in 1934 when the communists were being chased by Chiang Kai-shek's Nationalist Army, and they made a 3,000-mile trek through the China. It's a pretty amazing feat.
Yeah, I didn't know much about that when I read that section. And they started out with 300,000 people, and like 200,000 died.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's crazy. You mentioned earlier, what did you say? thehousesmoney.com. Is that your author website, or do you?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
yes.
And then do you have social media or anything?
I'm on Facebook. Just Owen Sullivan author. You can find me that way.
Okay.
I have a Twitter feed, but I don't do. I never tweet. I'm lame. I'm lame. I don't do that.
It's okay. We still like you.
Yeah. I also had a LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn thing, and my wife set that up. It's funny because she set it up when the House is Money first came out, and so every year now, whenever that date comes up, LinkedIn sends a thing out. They say a happy anniversary to Owen for his job. I get all these things. Hey, happy. I go, wait, it's not my job. It's a book.
It's a job, sort of, just a different job.
Anyway.
So we've talked about your books. We've talked about writing. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to just, that we haven't covered?
Well, let me just go back a little bit about the books. Mm-hmm. In the first three, it is a series. The first one kind of deals with the housing rise and crash in the Great Recession of 2006 and 8. The second one deals with water, fighting over water rights, mm-hmm. which is a big deal here in California. And I took my main character ends up in Sacramento, and Matt Whiteside, he ends up in Sacramento, and so he gets involved in not he per se, but he gets involved with these two ranchers who are fighting over water rights, which is an area on a ranch between Sacramento and Woodland. Mm-hmm. And it's actually that again, this is part of a true story. This actually happened. That ranch was called the Conway Ranch. PG&E sold it to these guys who were actually avid duck hunters, because it always flooded in the wintertime, and there was and then in the summertime they used it for rice fields. But one of them was a developer, and he was talking about developing a portion of this thing. Well, all of a sudden PG&E or Yolo County came along and said, we don't want to do that. We're going to take that. We're going to take your water rights. So they came after them and try to take their water rights. Well, that went to court and was a big, huge battle, and they lost. Yolo lost. But that's kind of where the story goes. Fighting over the water and all the water rights, and then selling water to Southern California. Right. So it's a big deal. And that's kind of how that's covered. And then the final book in that series is it deals with Ponzi schemes. If you've heard of Bernie Madoff, mm-hmm. he's a big financier back in New York who put together this huge investment fund that was billions of dollars, and it was all a scheme. It was all a Ponzi scheme. So this guy, my character, is kind of does that, and then he gets involved in reverse mortgages and preys on minorities and older people. So he's again, anytime there's money involved and big money, there's going to be corrupt people. Yeah. So there you have it.
Okay, thank you. So again, there's a trilogy, and then The Money is Green is a standalone, and your next book is a standalone.
It is.
So I want to thank you so much for
it.
Driving here and actually talking to me in person.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That was fun.
And as always, I want to thank once again my guest for today, Owen Sullivan, not only for taking the time out of his weekend, but to take the time to actually come to the studio and chat with me in person. That was a lot of fun, and it's always nice to see a friend. So, thank you to Owen for being on the podcast, for, sharing sharing your process and the way these books came about. I really appreciate it. Again, his books are The House is Money, Liquid Gold, and Deed of Trust. Those are the first 3 books that are a trilogy, and then the 4th standalone novel is The Money is Green. He also has a novel that will be forthcoming probably by the end of the year, maybe early next year, so keep an eye out for that. You can find his books on Amazon. You can find them on his website. As he mentioned, if you want a signed copy, he'd be happy to do that. So go ahead and check these out. If you like books with intrigue, books that have a bit of a thriller element, a bit of suspense, or, if you're interested in, kind of historical fiction in terms of that housing bubble and the financial crisis, etc., it's not that far away. You probably remember it pretty well. But then these are great books for that because they are, as we said, historical fiction. So thank you again to Owen. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you will join me again on Thursday when I will be talking about what else? Books and more books, and then probably talk a little bit about some books. So have a great week and join me again on Thursday. In the meantime, as always, go out there and get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.